To say that 2024 started off with a bang would be an unjust understatement. Right now, at the time of making this video, the largest ever bombardment of Ukraine is currently underway, and you'll be hard-pressed to hear about it in the news tomorrow. Okay, and if you do, I would be surprised. And this is absolutely terrifying because 2 years ago, when this war began, just the crossing over the border with 150,000 troops elicited mass panic and hysteria around the world. Everybody thought it was World War III, and rightly so. It was the beginning of it. Maybe not the beginning, but it was one of the beginnings of it. And now you have the largest ever bombardment, okay? Bar none. We're talking about 20 Tu-95 bombers, Kinzhal missiles, ballistic Iskander missiles, Black Sea Fleet, MiG-31s, Shahed drones, the Duran 2 drones, the whole 9 yards, okay? And this is only 72 hours after what then was the largest ever attack, just 72 hours ago, and nobody even cares. Yet we're closer to utilizing non-conventional weapons in this conflict than ever before, yet nobody cares. We've become so desensitized to this heightened state of war around the world and this particular war. I mean, I'm sure if a new war sprung up in Taiwan or North Korea, that would be all over the news, right, for a while. But what I'm noticing is that the more shit starts to happen in the world, the more short-lived the interest. Like, a story has to be incredibly prominent for people to even take interest nowadays in terms of a crisis scenario. I mean, October 7th was a fairly sizable event in terms of generating public buzz, and you had the protests that came thereafter, and it caused a lot of ruckus, but quickly subsided, receded back into normalcy, right? And the same thing is going to happen with this. I mean, you're not even going to hear about this. Is relegated to the dustbin of the main page of the mainstream media. You're probably not even going to hear about it unless NATO tries to seize upon the opportunity to gin up more support for this Ukraine spending bill, which they may do. I don't know how well it's going to work. At this point in time, I think nothing short of the use of a nuclear weapon in Ukraine is going to generate enough lasting interest for the Americans in particular, and even Europeans to some extent, to want to support this war, in spite of the fact that this becomes an existential war for NATO very, very soon. I'll explain why in just a moment. But it's incredible, the psychology of it, because now we're closer than ever before. The biggest ever attack is going to elicit the smallest response in the minds of the public. Yet, when those 150,000 Russian troops went over the border, with the tanks, and there was some skirmishes, and I think 1,200 troops, Russian troops, were lost. I mean, those numbers are like nothing nowadays, right? We're talking about losing that many troops a day in some cases. 500,000 troops in Ukraine, the Russian military over 2 million, and the largest bombing campaign ever. Nobody even cares anymore. Not a big deal. Nothing's ever going to happen, right? It's because everybody is expecting the big climactic event, the big turning point, the big, okay, this is it. Now we're in SHTF, and we all got to panic, and we all got to, be fixated on the television set and waiting for instruction. What if that time has already passed? And what if we're already in the thick of it and most people just are completely oblivious? I mean, when you're partying in the high-rise buildings on New Year's Eve and there's still water coming through the taps and there's electricity, I understand. That's a hard thing to pass up. But understand that our adversaries, Iran, North Korea, Russia, and increasingly China, they're thinking about this 24/7, that they are under the gun of economic warfare and sanctions, and that there is a effort by the collective West, as they term it, to deprive them of their sovereignty in some sort of way. This is what they think, okay? This is an existential threat that they live and breathe every single day. So imagine being Kim Jong-un or Vladimir Putin and waking up every single morning and worrying that not only might you lose your life, but that your country might fall apart, okay? And here it's a luxury that it's a footnote in the main page. Here it's a luxury that it's going to be news one day, and we're going to be talking about, you know, whatever sort of Epstein or Hunter Biden or whatever political shit the next, okay? But this is the real deal. We are closer to utilizing non-conventional weapons than we've ever been before in this conflict, and we've been so acclimatized to a new level of suck that nobody even realizes, except for the hardcore, you know, people who are on top of this stuff and understand the situation that we're in. And I commend people who have the endurance, who have the patience and the stamina to see the gradual progression and not get desensitized to stuff. Because what's been happening from my point of view, and I could be wrong, maybe I'm just too pessimistic, what's been happening is that we've been approaching new levels of austerity and, for lack of better terms, new levels of suck, okay? And we reach a new plateau of suck, and then something shitty happens, like October 7th, right? And then a new war starts, and okay, well, we all get in a tizzy about that, and, you know, eventually, okay, that's just, you know, it's part of life now, right? We become adapted to that. And then, you know, another crisis will arise, and all of a sudden we're adapted to that once again. And who knows what it's going to be next in 2024. We've had earthquakes, and we've had the biggest bombardment to date, and it's only the first. Okay, well, I guess it's going to be the second by the time this video gets released. But we could have another financial crisis, and we'll acclimate to that. And it's going to go on and on and on until we reach a point where we realize, holy shit, this is SHTF, right? But the nuclear bombs haven't dropped yet. So everybody, every time I, you know, do a turning over video for the new year, or I do a series of videos around the New Year's where we start doing a bit more predictions about what's coming, there's always that 10% of my viewership who is very fickle and who either loves you or hates you, depending on the video you put out. I still appreciate them. And there's the 90% of you who are ride or die. You know, you're the rocks of the channel. I appreciate you. But there's always those guys who are commenting like, hey, you know, you've been saying this stuff for 4 years and nothing's happened. Well, I mean, I've probably done a video on this before, but take the 4 years that we've just experienced and condense them into a month and tell me that nothing has transpired, you know, that nothing unprecedented. I mean, unprecedented was the most used word in 2023. Everything was unprecedented. And still to date, I mean, we're not expecting any snow in the forecast. Like up until January 15th, as far as they can predict, there's no snow in the forecast. And we've seen obscenely high temperatures here. They're finally starting to pay attention to it in the media, but what I've noticed is that they're not creating as much alarm as they likely should. If they're really serious, guys, about, oh, we want to bring in the carbon tax and blah, 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 they would be making more noise. I genuinely think that, of course, they want to exploit every crisis. The government does, don't get me wrong. But I think they genuinely want to minimize panic about the climate situation as well. Anyways, that's a sidebar, which is why there's been certain things that the Weather Network has been doing, and the fact that they're not seizing on this opportunity and shouting from the rooftops on every mainstream network that we're experiencing in North America, like unprecedented warm weather all year that's well exceeds what's typical for El Nino, is concerning. Okay, but that's another story. So anyways, getting back to World War III. This is concerning because what Putin might be doing is signaling to the West that, hey, it's your move now. You know, maybe Putin is trying to interdict something that we were planning. But something is going on. Something is not right about the timing of this. People might suspect that, well, it's just the run-of-the-mill pre-winter, because winter has come so late. Last year, this started in October. But it's the run-of-the-mill, taking out of the critical infrastructure, softening up the military so that they can go in there and do some offensive operation. It's possible. It's possible we might get the Russian spring offensive finally now, this year. Last year, they were talking about the Russian spring offensive, right? At the beginning of 2023, never happened. In fact, it was the Ukrainians that went on the offensive. Maybe they were talking about 2024 would be the time for the offensive. And I actually think, now that I just said that, I think there was somebody at the time who had said there's not going to be a Russian offensive till 2024. So here we go. Anyways, Vladimir Putin comes out today. He says, Ukraine isn't my enemy. Ukrainians aren't the enemy. NATO, the parasite, puppeteering these, from their perspective, corrupt Ukrainian officials, that is our enemy. And that is a profound statement. Even though that has been the unspoken rule of thumb up until this point, the fact that he said that is pretty important. And he also said that if he wanted to, they could lay Kyiv to waste. They could be as irrespective of collateral damage as the Israelis in the Gaza Strip. And we got to talk about that situation as well, because it ain't going too well for them. But they haven't. And this goes back to our original hypothesis that they want to keep Ukraine intact. Not only the critical infrastructure, though, but they want to keep intact and this is where you know that the strategic genius of Vladimir Putin. You want to keep the hearts and minds of Ukrainians intact. You want to give them an out, right? When you know that eventually resentment is going to build to such an extent, they're going to see so much death, they're going to see so much deprivation of their rights and freedoms and postponement of the elections and watching their family members thrown in the backs of vans and sent to the meat grinder, that they're going to revolt at some point in time. But above and beyond that, I think he's probably playing this game where you don't want to, like, you have to ask yourself, why haven't they, taken out railroad tracks? And maybe it's easier said than done, but why are they allowing this stuff to come in here? Why does he allow the cow to continually get fattened? Well, it's so that you can slaughter the cow, right? So if NATO is going to keep sending weapons in, and you got your human intelligence on the ground, which is going to tell you where they're storing this stuff, and you're going to take it out like they did with the depleted uranium shells and the Storm Shadow stockpiles, why wouldn't you just let them keep doing that? So maybe that's the strategy. Maybe Putin is just playing this game is where, okay, we'll keep them at a level of strength where they're strong enough to continually drain NATO of weapons, and we'll keep blowing this shit up, and we'll leave all the infrastructure intact so that they can keep bringing it in. Is that what's happening? I don't know. Is this Putin's final provocation to NATO, saying, okay, this is the beginning? And I do fear that this is just the beginning, because 3 days ago, we seen one of the largest bombardment. Today, an even bigger one. Are we going to continue to see this? Is this a new phase of the war? Is this the end of the war, or is this just the beginning of the war with NATO, is the question. You got people like Ben Hodges and Sarah Aston Cirillo saying that they're going to blow up the Kerch Bridge in 2024, that it's a guarantee, that it's in the bag. And I don't know how they're going to do it, maybe with Taurus missiles, maybe with the F-16s. We're going to find out. We are at a critical turning point. This is January 1st. And the fact that this happened on the first of the year tells you exactly how this year is going to go. Now, Sarah Aston Cirillo, the former spokesperson for the militia, the Ukrainian militia in Ukraine, is now in the United States for some reason. They made their way, because they're detransitioning now, so I don't know what gender, I don't want to misgender, but I'll just call them they for now, because I don't even know what they go by, because they even changed their name on Twitter. So they're now at the border of Mexico and the United States. And I'm thinking, like, what are you doing at the border of Mexico and the United States? And then it occurred to me what they're up to. What they're up to is they're trying to make the association with the border crisis and the Ukrainian crisis in order to lock in that funding. Because now what they're doing, they got, I guess they think they have brain cells. They've been listening to us. they've caught wind that, oh, maybe there's some sleeper cells coming in over the border, and oh yeah, there's 57,000 Russians that came in over the border. And I'm not saying they're entirely wrong. I mean, why wouldn't you? If you were the Russians and the Chinese, you would be stupid not to exploit the border crisis. So I'm not saying that that's just propaganda and there's nothing to it. There most definitely is something to it. But the fact that they're bringing it up now, and so now I believe that we're at the inception of a new campaign which is going to seek to link the border with the Russians, right? The Russians are coming over the border. So now Biden has the justification he needs to save the Ukrainians, right? You see what I'm saying? So I think that's what's going to happen. Anyways, that's just a sidebar. Why the hell is this person now back in the United States is something that people should be asking. And I said on Twitter, like, oh, are you giving up on Ukraine? And like, no, I'm here on vacation. What? Why? That makes no sense. Vacation in a war? Plus, at the border, after you went to Washington to have all these, that you're boasting about on Twitter, that you're having these high-profile meetings with, politicians and whatnot. Anyway, something stinks there. So we know that the Civil Air Reserve has been activated. I talked about that yesterday. I got sent an email by someone who indicated it was a very, it was a legit email. And the email was so extensive that I couldn't even read it because there are so many abbreviations and airlines and a lot of things that I would have to black out of the email. But essentially, the Civil Air Reserve has been activated. And what this is, when the military capacity to coordinate logistics is exceeded, then they can commandeer commercial vessels, and there's a partnership between various FedEx, UPS, different companies in order to facilitate military logistics in the state of emergency. If there's a state of emergency, undisclosed emergency in this case, then they can utilize that option. They did it in 2021 when they had to shuttle vaccines all around, I suppose. That's what I assume it was anyways. Maybe there was something else going on. But this has been activated. So what does it mean? Which theater is it for? Is it for Poland? Is it to get military equipment into Poland for Ukraine? We don't know. Is it to get military equipment into Taiwan? Because the election is on the 9th, and apparently the pro-independent leader is in the lead right now. The one who is running as a, for Taiwanese sovereignty from the Chinese mainland is currently in the lead in the polls. So they say anyways. Is it for Taiwan? Is it for South Korea? Is it for Israel, Hezbollah, Yemen? I mean, it's likely for the Middle East, I presume. But we just simply don't know yet. In terms of what's happening with the Houthis, ain't nothing like a Houthi response. You remember in the movie Snatch when they say there ain't no response like a piker response? Well, there ain't no response like a Houthi response, and that's what's being hatched right now. A high-ranking diplomat went to meet with the Iranian defense minister today, and apparently what we're likely going to see now is the Houthis are going to respond. They want nothing more than to go to war with the West. They believe that they can win. They believe that they can cause enough disruption that the West will back down. And you even have the Israelis apparently withdrawing several brigades from the Gaza Strip. They're getting their asses handed to them left and right. They're showing these maps where they say that they're in control of all the parts of the map, but that's just where they've kind of started to work in. They don't actually have control over the entirety of that map. And I got to hand it to him. I don't always agree with Scott Ritter, but he was right about that situation. Now they're saying that war is going to go on all through 2024. Anyways, getting back to the Houthi situation, the Houthis are likely going to escalate. It's very likely that the Americans and the Brits are getting ready to do a massive offensive. Now, it might not come for a few weeks. Typically, how it's been played out, just like the Gaza invasion, it took them damn near, like a month and a half, 6 weeks or something before they actually went in from the time that the decision was effectively made. So I imagine that we're going to just, have to wait. It's going to be protracted and prolonged for an extended period of time before they actually go in and do something. So shit's going to happen in the Red Sea. There's no doubt about that. I think they're just biding their time and they're waiting because they understand the chaos that the Houthis can inflict. Some people think they're going to go into Lebanon instead. The border with Lebanon has heated up immensely in the last 24 hours. I mean, just sorties, missiles, artillery, you know, just every single day it's escalating in a massive way, just like the West Bank. The West Bank is almost becoming the Gaza Strip. In terms of the Gaza Strip, the Netanyahu government is saying we're withdrawing our Israeli brigades because of economic reasons. We need them back in the economy to stimulate the economy. Now, Israel has a damn good economy. We're talking about $500 billion a year, something to that effect, for a population of only 9 million people. And a lot of them are under the apartheid West Bank and Gaza Strip. So you're really talking about a fairly high GDP per person. So need is a relative term, I suppose. What it starts to look like is they're likely taking these troops and they're getting them repositioned to fight on another front. Because for whatever reason, the thing in Gaza is just not going to plan. And either they're willing, and perhaps this is another explanation, is that Netanyahu knows that as soon as the wars are over, he's out, right? Apparently, the Supreme Court struck down his changes to the legal system there. So that's not going to happen. So, you know, this is do or die for him now. And he's got to make this war last as long as possible. And so why not just stretch out the war and just take your time? You know, if the population there is going to be okay with you taking your time with this war, and you're going to suffer less losses as a result, because you're going to be able to do, you know, more intensive ISR gathering and be able to more precisely take out your targets, and you're going to try to attrit them a little bit more. That could be what they're doing. They're just going to try to, you know, starve them out, essentially. And I don't know if that's going to work because, you know, it's just a complicated situation. But that's what they're going to try to do. And the war with Lebanon is going to start. And yeah, that's what's coming. That's what's coming on that front. So I can tell you right now, my priorities for 2024 are not much different than what they've been in previous years. However, I am going to be thinking far more strategically. So you can look at your prepping in terms of tactics, operations, and strategies. And I think a lot of people, when they first get into this, it's strictly about tactics, because you got to focus on the bug out bag. You got to focus on, okay, I need the food right away. I need to do whatever I can to just get to a little bit of a comfort zone where if something were to happen soon, I would be prepared, right? But we also have to think long-term, strategically, strategic relocation. We had Sean James, we did an interview with him recently. We're going to release that video this week. He's the author of My Self-Reliance YouTube channel. Excellent channel. I mean, if there was anybody I would want to emulate, it would be this guy, okay? At some point in time. And I'm not saying it's an easy life that he lives. It's a challenging life. He makes it look easy, but it's always a lot harder than it looks. But thinking in those terms, so thinking strategically in the sense of strategic relocation, and not just planning as if SHTF is going to happen tomorrow. It might, and we have to be tactical, but we also have to think strategically. So the way I go about even just how I operate business is every week I want to make a series of little changes. I want to make a medium change. Every month I want to make a pretty big change. You know, I want to do something a little different. And every 6 months or a year, I make one like mega change, okay? Where it's like a completely different approach in order to, because that's what you have to do. You have to keep changing it up. Now, of course, physical fitness is going to be top of mind. Stress inoculation, getting comfortable in challenging situations, because when under stress, there's going to come a period where this is going to get real, and we might have that flashbulb moment where that we've all been waiting for, that the movies have told us is coming, and that Hollywood has trained us to believe SHDF how it's supposed to unfold. There may come a point where, yes, we're in a very dangerous situation. Either the bombs drop, or there's a financial crisis and there's riots in the streets or whatever, and we have to keep our wits about us. We have to inoculate ourselves to stress by putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations so we can maintain our fine motor skills, not only in terms of our fingers, because I've been doing some firearms training with Rod Giltack, and one of the things that they try to induce is they try to get you in a very stressful situation so that you aren't able to make a phone call because you just can't keep your hands straight because you're shaking, or you're trying to, you just can't think straight because you're in a gross movement mode where it's like fight or flight, run or punch, or just blunt movements, right? But you have to be able to come back to a place to find your ground. They use grounding techniques to get back to that place where you can maintain control of your fine motor skills, not only in the physical, but also in the mental, so that you're not succumbing to that tunnel vision and you're able to meticulously make decisions on the fly. So stress inoculation is going to be a theme on this channel in the coming year. We're also going to be just talking to a lot of guests from a variety, and I'm going to be interviewed by some very YouTube channels that I'm sure you're familiar with, and working our way up monkey branching our way up the ladder, so to speak. So it's actually quite exciting. Skill development is going to be a major thing. We're going to be redoing our whole indoor growing operation, not the funny stuff, Normalcy Norman. Maybe a little bit of that. As you guys know, I always keep it because it's legal here in Canada, so you can go and buy pot seeds. So I do have some pot seeds that I keep just in case. Don't smoke this stuff. Way too powerful for me. I'm getting too old for that stuff. It messes with my head. But it's good to have around in case the shit hits the fan, because you just never know. You could use that for barter. You can use it for medicinal purposes. As well as investing, because this is going to be the year. I mean, everybody's talking about gold, 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 which is kind of scary because that means we're entering a FOMO phase of gold. And I don't know if there's going to be a bit of a blow off top at some point. But, and another thing that concerns me too is everybody thinks that the shit's going to hit the fan this year. Like everybody, every channel is talking about it. Financial channels, they're all building bunkers. Mr. Beast is going to be doing some bunker videos soon. And I mean, all these people are going to be, it's going to become very, very popular, the whole survival genre, not just in the surviving in the wilderness sense, but in the prepper sense, okay? And this is probably why channels like mine have been deranked and delisted from the search algorithm. When you go and search my name, maybe 2 videos comes up, whereas you search any other channel who is in the good boy books of the algorithm, and all the search results will be their name. Anyways, I'm not going to complain. It is what it is. That just means that I got some integrity, I guess, with this. So it's going to become mainstream, and that makes me think, because, Warren Buffett always said, when there's fear, buy. When there's greed, sell, right? Like buy when people are greedy, and be fearful when people are, be fearful when people are greedy, and greedy when people are fearful. If everybody's starting to be fearful, it makes me wonder, maybe things will work themselves out. But then I just look at the state of affairs and I'm like, how is it going to work itself out? We're going to be facing an agricultural crisis, like of apocalyptic proportions soon, I think. It could be this year. Like it would probably, the only reason why it wouldn't be this year is because a lot of times the inputs into agriculture are acquired the year before. So like the fertilizers and stuff like that, like the farmers are already fully supplied. The price of fuel is still relatively low for now. So that's a big input as well. But all of the things like pesticides, insecticides, people have got their stuff on lock already, but it would be the next year. But if we have a really shit crop this year, and India continues to not export because they're having climate issues, or China continues for military purposes, and the sanctions on Russia continues, and that conflict ensues, and the supply chain breaks down due to the shipping crises, and the banks shut down, and we got cyber attacks, and I mean, I just cannot foresee how this all works itself out in a colorful way. And we all just, play with AI and robots from here on in with our robot butlers and our virtual reality headsets. But I hope I'm wrong, guys, but just keep on prepping, man. And I don't like asking people what kind of videos they want to see on the channel, because for me, I don't know, it just doesn't seem... For me, if I want to make a video, it has to come from the heart. And if I'm just doing something commissioned, I don't have an interest in it. And maybe it's a bit selfish, but I feel as though if I want to keep this going, it has to be things I believe in. And I think that's been working up until this point. But if there's an issue or a prepping topic that you really want me to cover, and there's like a unanimous, hey, we got to do this more, then I'll do it. Because I do also have to, respect the viewpoints. The only reason, it's not that I don't respect you guys, it's just that if I want to be doing this and I want to have passion for it, and I want it to be engaging for you, the only way that comes across in the videos is if I'm making the decisions and calling the shots, if you know what I mean. Just want to give you a heads up. We're going to be doing another video with our resident nuclear physicist, Kai, the radiation guy. Looks like that's not going to focus there. There we go. This is a Canadian-made, a one-of-a-kind, an incredibly rare Geiger counter that is made for the purpose of nuclear war, okay? Most of the Geiger counters you see on Amazon, you can't trust that they're going to have the detection range and all of the features that you're going to need in that type of circumstance. So these are made here. Okay, actually they're made right next door. They're made in this warehouse, but next door. And yeah, this is the best Geiger counter on the market for that. Pick one up at CanadianPreparedness.com. They're incredibly rare. They are a bit more expensive because they're not made by Chinese robots, but it is what it is. So you can pick one up. I think there's a limit on 2 per person because they're, right now, I don't even know how much we have in stock, but we're only making like 100 a month at this point. So, but we do have a large influx coming in soon, so capitalize on it while you can. All right, man, let's see what happens on January 2nd. See you tomorrow.